October 12, 1941. Central Mediterranean Sea, aboard HMS Valiant Sparrow. Moonlight cuts a narrow silver path across the waves, broken only by the foaming wake of the destroyer knifing through dark water at flank speed. The air is thick with the smell of salt and hot machinery rising from the engine rooms below. On the forward deck, lamps glow dim red, blackout mode, casting the silhouettes of sailors in sharp relief as they prepare for another tense night escorting a convoy to Malta. Able seaman Thomas Hale, 19 years old, stands near the starboard rail, one hand resting on the warm steel. His other hand grips a folded letter tucked in his breast pocket, one he intends to finish when the watch changes. He looks younger than his uniform suggests, with wind-chapped cheeks and eyes that rarely settle in one place for long. Inside the bridge, the ship's captain watches radar operators track faint echoes on the water. Reports of Italian submarines have haunted the convoy for days. Nerves are stretched thin. At 1:17 hours, the night explodes. A blinding flash erupts beneath the destroyer's keel, followed by a roar that shakes the vessel from bow to stern. The deck shudders violently. Men are thrown off their feet. The shockwave slams Thomas against a stanchion hard enough to knock the breath from his lungs. Below decks, metal screams. Then, fire. A column of flame erupts through the forward compartment, painting the sky orange for a heartbeat before collapsing into choking black smoke. Burning fuel spreads across the deck like liquid fire. Torpedo hit. Forward magazine compromised. Someone shouts. Klaxons wail. Boots thunder along the steel plating as sailors rush to damage control stations. Thomas staggers upright, ears ringing, eyes watering from smoke rolling across the deck. He hears men screaming from below, trapped behind buckled hatches. The sound will stay with him until his final breath. Thomas scrambles toward the forward hose reel with two others from his section. The hose coughs before spraying a weak, sputtering stream. Pressure's dying. Something below must be flooding or blown apart entirely. Flames leap 3 meters high as the wind feeds them. Burning oil runs in long serpentine trails across the plating. One sailor slips and falls into it, his uniform igniting instantly. Thomas lunges forward, dragging him toward cover, but the man's cries fade almost immediately. Get to the lifeboats, a petty officer roars. She's taking on water fast. The bow is already dipping. Each second the list worsens. Thomas feels for the letter in his pocket, the one addressed to his mother and younger brother, Michael. He had begun it earlier that evening, writing about the stars, about the routine of escort duty, about hope. Now those words feel like lies. Smoke thickens. The heat becomes unbearable. The ship lurches as another explosion, smaller, secondary, shivers through the hull. Thomas realizes the truth. HMS Valiant Sparrow is dying. Around him, men scramble to cut free the Kali floats. Others fight the fire with anything they can grab, buckets, extinguishers, wet clothing, but the flames devour the deck faster than any effort can contain. Thomas coughs hard, tasting soot. He pulls the letter from his pocket. It is smeared with grease, the edges curled from heat. He stares at it for a moment, then makes a decision that surprises even him. He kneels behind a splintered bulkhead, shielding himself from the wind, and takes out a pencil. If these are his last moments, he will finish the letter. Around him, the ship burns. Men shout. Metal groans like a wounded animal. And Thomas Hale, 19 and far too young for fear like this, begins to write. Mum, I don't know how much time I have. He presses harder as the deck tilts beneath him. But I want you to know. Smoke curls around his hands. Flames flicker closer. Still he writes. October 12, 1941, 5 minutes after impact. Flames crawl along the deck like living things, hissing as they lick spilled fuel. Smoke rolls in choking waves, turning the night into a hellish blur of orange and black. Sailors stagger through it, coughing, shouting, pulling wounded men toward the lifeboats as the bow of the Valiant Sparrow sinks deeper into the Mediterranean. Thomas Hale knows he should be helping them. Every instinct of a trained sailor tells him to fight the fire, to carry the injured, to obey the shouted orders. But another instinct, older, quieter, deeper, holds him where he is. He pulls his knees tighter to his chest, shielding the fragile sheet of paper from sparks raining down around him. His pencil trembles in his hand. He feels the ship tilt again and hears a terrifying groan echo through the hull below. Water is rushing in. They don't have long. He forces his focus onto the words. Mum. I don't know how this will reach you. I'm riding while everything shakes apart around us. Another explosion rocks the forward deck. Thomas flinches, hand jerking, scratching a dark line across the page. The blast sends splinters of steel skipping across the deck like angry sparks. One piece cuts his sleeve open and grazes his arm. He doesn't feel the pain. He only feels urgency. He keeps riding. Tell Michael I'm thinking of him. I wore the lucky coin he gave me. I'm touching it now. It makes me feel like he's here with me. He pauses, swallowing hard. His throat burns from smoke. His eyes stream tears that have nothing to do with emotion. Above him, a main gun mount groans, its housing warped from heat. A petty officer yells from somewhere in the haze. All hands to the rafts. Abandon ship. The deck tilts another few degrees. Men scramble past, one grabbing Thomas by the shoulder. Hale, what the hell are you doing? Move. Thomas looks up at him, eyes wild but steady. I have to finish this. The petty officer hesitates, baffled, outraged, then realizes nothing he says will move the boy. He curses and sprints for the portside rail. Heat intensifies. Flames chew through the forward structure. The smell of burning paint mixes with something worse. The smell of burning rope, burning wood, burning flesh. Thomas continues. I'm not frightened, Mum. At least. I'm trying not to be. I think everyone is pretending to be braver than they are. If I don't come home, please don't be angry. I did my duty. I stayed with my mates. That's all any man can do. His hand falters. Not from doubt, from weakness. He tucks the pencil under his thumb and presses on. You always told me to write when I was scared. So I'm writing now, and suddenly I don't feel so alone. Another shout rises above the roaring flames. Last raft's going over. Move. Thomas's heart hammers. The deck is so hot beneath him that he can feel the heat through his trousers. His skin prickles. He knows he cannot stay much longer. He scrawls the last lines he can manage. Whatever happens next, know that I love you both. That's all I wanted to say. Your son, Tom. A sudden gust of wind sends sparks flying. One lands on the letter. Thomas slams his hand over it, protecting it desperately. He can't let it burn. Not now. Not after this. He clutches the page to his chest, scanning the deck through watering eyes. Nearby lies a small, dented Royal Navy biscuit tin, its lid knocked loose in the explosion. He crawls toward it. Not for survival. For the letter. He opens the tin, folds the page with trembling fingers, and seals it tight inside. Behind him, the flames roar louder as the destroyer's boat sinks beneath the waves. There is no time left. Thomas Hale rises unsteadily, clutching the tin, and staggers toward the rail. October 12, 1941, 1:26 hours. The forward deck tilts sharply now, angling toward the sea at nearly 20 degrees. Water surges across the plating, mixing with burning oil and scattered debris. Flames roar along the superstructure, fed by ruptured fuel lines. The night sky pulses orange with each new burst of fire. Thomas Hale fights for balance, gripping the biscuit tin so tightly his knuckles turn white. Smoke thickens the air until it feels like breathing through wet cloth. The heat behind him is unbearable, an invisible hand pushing him toward the edge. He coughs violently, doubling over. Somewhere aft, a voice bellows. Jump, lads. Now. She's going under. A rush of sailors sprints past him toward the starboard rail. Some leap without hesitation. Others pause only long enough to cross themselves before diving into the black waves. Thomas moves with them, step by step, the deck vibrating beneath his boots. Every few seconds he glances down at the tin, making sure it hasn't slipped from his grasp. It holds everything now, his apology, his love, his last breath set down in pencil. He reaches the rail just as another explosion tears through the forward magazine. A monstrous plume of fire blasts upward, illuminating the horrified faces of the men on deck. The shockwave knocks several sailors overboard. Thomas clings to the rail with one hand, the tin with the other. His ears ring. His vision swims. When the flare of the explosion dies, the Mediterranean returns to pitch black, an endless void. But he hears the ocean now. The heaving crash of waves. The violent hiss of burning oil hitting water. He knows he must jump. Before he climbs the rail, He presses the tin to his chest and whispers something no one hears, a message not written in a letter. Please find your way home. He tucks the tin inside his jacket, buttons it tight, and hoists himself up. His boots slip on oil-coated steel. He nearly falls backward into fire, but a sailor behind him shoves him forward. Go, Tom. Jump. Thomas climbs onto the railing. Below him, the sea churns, black, cold, indifferent. Burning patches drift like floating mirrors of the flames behind him. He spots a Kali float bobbing 30 meters away with silhouettes clinging to its rim. He takes one last breath of hot, smoky air. This is it, he thinks. Mum. Michael. I hope you know. Then he jumps. The water hits him like a wall of ice. The shock steals what little air he has left. Darkness closes around him as he sinks beneath the surface, arms flailing weakly. His boots drag him downward. The weight of his soaked uniform threatens to pull him deeper. But the tin, clutched against his chest, keeps him fighting. He kicks, barely. He rises, slowly. His head breaks the surface, and he gasps a ragged, desperate breath. Chaos surrounds him. Burning oil drifts in pools across the water. Sailors shout for help. Some cling to debris, others swim frantically to the rafts. The sound of the dying ship fills the air, metal twisting, bulkheads collapsing, the deep groan of a vessel giving its last breath. Thomas spits seawater, turns toward the nearest float, and begins swimming one arm at a time, the tin trapped awkwardly beneath his jacket. His strokes are clumsy. His limbs feel like lead. A sailor on the raft spots him. There. Hail. Over here. Thomas tries to answer but chokes on salt water. He forces himself onward, each movement a battle against the cold and exhaustion. 10 meters. 5. 2. A hand reaches down, gripping his arm. Got you. Thomas is dragged onto the raft's edge, coughing violently. The tin thumps against his ribs inside his jacket. You all right, Tom? The sailor asks. He nods, though tears mix with seawater on his cheeks. He looks back at HMS Valiant Sparrow just as she rolls onto her side. Flames vanish beneath the waves. Her stern rises like a dying animal's last cry. Then she slips beneath the surface. Sailors bow their heads. Thomas holds the tin. In the darkness, surrounded by survivors fighting the cold, he whispers, "It will reach them. Somehow." October 12, 1941, 2:10 hours. The sea around the survivors quiets for the first time since the torpedo struck. Flames dim into smoldering patches on the water surface, drifting like dying lanterns. The moon hangs faintly behind a veil of smoke, casting a dull glow over the wreckage scattered across the Mediterranean. On the Kali float, Thomas Hale lies with his back against the rope-lined rim, chest heaving. His soaked uniform clings to his thin frame. The biscuit tin inside his jacket presses cold and solid against his ribs, a weight that reminds him he is still alive. Around him, the raft carries 12 men, though it was built for 8. Shoulders press against shoulders. Arms link instinctively to prevent anyone from slipping into the water. The petty officer in charge murmurs, rescue ship should be close. Convoys signaling for help. But even he doesn't sound convinced. The She is fast. The night is long. And the destroyer that would have rescued them is now a grave beneath the waves. Thomas closes his eyes, letting the rocking of the raft numb his trembling muscles. Behind the exhaustion, behind the ringing in his ears, there's only one thought. The letter must survive. He presses a hand to his jacket, feeling the metal edge of the tin. Salt water has already seeped into the fabric, chilling him to the bone. He curls protectively around it, ignoring the shivers that ripple through him. Beside him, Seaman Robert Finch, a man 5 years older with tired eyes and soot streaking his face, notices. You all right? Finch asks quietly. Thomas nods weakly. What's in your jacket? You've been guarding it like treasure. Thomas hesitates, swallowing hard. His voice emerges as a hoarse whisper. A letter. My last one. Finch stares at him for a long moment. Then he nods, understanding. They always say to write home when you get the chance. He manages a sad half-smile. Most of us never think to do it in time. Thomas clutches the tin tighter. A wave splashes over the float, drenching the men again. The cold stabs like needles. One sailor mutters through chattering teeth, Bloody hell, Tom, I hope that letter's worth all this. It is, he whispers. It has to be. Hours pass. Some men drift in and out of consciousness. Others mumble prayers. Thomas keeps his focus on the horizon, though darkness hides everything beyond arm's reach. Then, a light. Dim, flickering, but real. A signal lamp sweeping across the water. The raft erupts with weak cheers. A rescue vessel, possibly a corvette from the convoy, moves toward them, its bow cutting through the black waves. A spotlight snaps on. There. Survivors off the starboard bow. The men straighten, raising arms, shouting hoarsely. Thomas feels relief slam into him so hard it almost steals his breath. He tightens his grip on the tin until his fingers ache. He has survived the torpedo. Survived the fire. Survived the sea. He has done everything he can. Hours later, after the survivors are hauled aboard the rescue ship and wrapped in blankets, Thomas sits alone on a bench near the sickbay door. His skin is pale, lips trembling uncontrollably from cold. The tin rests in his lap. A medic approaches. "You're lucky you weren't pulled under," he remarks gently. "Most don't make it long in that water." Thomas glances up, eyes hollow. "I just needed this to stay dry," he whispers, tapping the tin. "What's inside?" "A letter. For my mum. I finished it just before we went over." The medic nods, admiring the courage behind the simple explanation. But Thomas isn't finished. "I need you to promise, if anything happens to me, make sure someone sends it." The medic studies him silently, then kneels beside him and places a firm hand on his shoulder. "You have my word." Thomas exhales shakily, feeling exhaustion drag at his eyelids. For the first time since the torpedo struck, he lets himself rest. He never wakes. 2 days later, when the rescue ship reaches Alexandria, the biscuit tin is passed to naval records. Inside is a single folded letter, written in pencil, edges singed but intact. Months later, it washes ashore in Britain, carried by currents or fate. It is delivered to his family with his effects. A mother opens it with trembling hands. A brother reads every line aloud. And a 19-year-old sailor's final words finally reach home. March 3rd, 1942. Cornwall, England, a windswept shoreline at dawn. The tide recedes slowly across pale sand, leaving behind a scatter of kelp, driftwood, and broken shells. Gulls wheel overhead, their cries cutting through the bitter morning air. A fisherman named Arthur Penrose trudges along the surfline, boots sinking into wet sand as he scans for anything worth salvaging after last night's storm. Something metallic glints among the debris. He pauses, squinting. A dull grey tin, battered and salt-stained, half buried in the sand. He kneels and lifts it free. Its lid is sealed tight, the metal warped but still whole. He turns it over in his hands, puzzled. Royal Navy issue. A biscuit tin. The kind sailors carried. Curiosity overcomes him. He carries it up the shore and pries it open with a knife. Inside, wrapped in layers of damp but intact paper, is a folded letter. Arthur reads only the first line before his breath catches. "Mum, I don't know how much time I have." His hands tremble. He closes the tin, rewraps the letter, and sprints toward the village Coast Guard station. This is not flotsam. This is a message from a man who did not survive. Within a week, through naval channels and wartime bureaucracy, the tin reaches a small house in Portsmouth, home of Mrs. Margaret Hale, Thomas's mother. A uniformed officer stands at her door, cap in hand. He says her son's name with a softness that prepares her for the rest. She knows even before he speaks the words. "Your son, able seaman Thomas Hale, died of exposure after the loss of HMS Valiant Sparrow. We recovered his effects. But one item found its way back to shore." He hands her the tin. Her fingers shake violently as she opens it. Inside lies the page her son touched with shaking hands in the final minutes of his life. She unfolds it as though it might crumble. Her eyes move across every line, the smoke-stained margins, the rushed handwriting, the smudged final strokes. When she reaches the last words, "Whatever happens next, know that I love you both." She presses the page to her face and sobs into it, unable to stop herself. Her younger son, Michael, stands beside her, silent, gripping her arm. He is 15 years old. When she finally hands him the letter, he reads it aloud, voice cracking on nearly every sentence. This is the first time they have heard Tom's voice since the day he boarded the train. Weeks later, the Admiralty requests permission to preserve the letter as part of a wartime archive. They tell her gently that few writings show such clarity in the face of death, that it might comfort other families. Mrs. Hale agrees. Not because she wishes to share her grief, but because she wants the world to know who her son was in the final moments of his life. In the archive, naval historians read the letter with reverence. It becomes known informally as the biscuit tin letter, a small testament of courage written while steel burned, fuel ignited, and a ship died beneath a young sailor's fate. The letter goes on display months later in a small exhibition titled Voices from the Sea War. Visitors pause longest before Tom's writing. Some wipe their eyes. Others trace the edge of the glass as if touching the past. A curator notes, "This boy knew he was dying. Yet his only fear was leaving words unsaid." Back in Portsmouth, Mrs. Hale keeps the tin on a mantelpiece beside a photograph of Tom in his dress blues. The metal is warped, dented, stained with salt and soot, but it is the most precious object in her home. Some evenings she holds it in both hands, closes her eyes, and imagines the moment her son sealed it shut. His last act. His last strength. His last message across the sea. She whispers to the tin, though she knows he cannot hear. "Your letter came home, Tom. I promise, it came home." May 1942, Royal Navy Memorial Service, Portsmouth. The wind carries the scent of the Channel across the pier as families gather beneath a grey sky. The sea is calm today, deceptively gentle, its surface rippling with pale light as if unaware of the grief that follows it. Sailors in dress blues form a silent line along the railing. Officers bow their heads. A chaplain steps forward and begins to read the names of the men lost aboard HMS Valiant Sparrow. One name echoes louder for a mother seated near the front. Able Seaman Thomas Hale. Mrs. Hale closes her eyes. Michael grips her hand. In her coat pocket rests the biscuit tin, the same dented metal box that endured explosions, fire, salt water, and the slow violence of the Mediterranean's currents. She carries it the way others might carry a medal or a flag. To her, it is all three. After the service, she walks alone to the pier's edge. The waves lap gently against the stone wall. She imagines her son's ship cutting across those waters, the hum of engines, the clatter of boots, the smell of oil and salt. She imagines the torpedo hitting, the fire, the chaos, her son finding a place to kneel and finish his goodbye while the world burned around him. The tin feels heavy in her hands, heavier than it should, as if it holds not just the letter but the memory of the young man who wrote it. She opens it one more time. The letter lies inside, preserved now in a protective sleeve supplied by the Admiralty. She reads the first line aloud, voice trembling. "Mum, I don't know how much time I have." Her breath catches. She quickly folds it closed again. Some pain never softens. Some love never does either. Years later, as the war grinds on, the letter becomes something more than a private relic. It is shown to recruits as an example of composure in catastrophe. It circulates quietly among naval families, copied by hand, passed from widow to widow like a thread of shared understanding. Not glory. Not patriotism. Humanity. A testimony that even when steel shatters and fire takes the decks, a boy of 19 can still think first of his family, of his mother's hands, of his brother's laughter, of the home he hoped to return to. The Admiralty eventually places the original in a sealed case at the National Maritime Museum. But the tin stays with Mrs. Hale. She declines many requests to display it publicly. "That," she says each time, "I keep for Tom." On quiet evenings, when the war news crackles from the wireless, she sits by the fireplace with the tin on her lap. She runs her thumb along the dented lid, the mark of the explosion, and wonders how something so fragile survived when her son did not. Michael grows older. He joins the war effort. Each time he leaves the house, she taps the tin for luck and whispers, "Bring him home." She never again reads the letter aloud, but she memorizes every word. Decades later, long after the guns fall silent and the world moves on, a historian studying naval correspondence will write, "It was not the battles that defined the sailors of the Mediterranean, but the things they carried, courage, fear, and the letters they hoped would find their way home." Among them, one letter stands above the rest, not because of heroism or grandeur, but because of a trembling pencil line written as a ship died beneath its writer's fate. A line that crossed oceans. A line that reached a mother's hands. Tom Hale's last message remains preserved today, a voice against the roar of torpedoes and flame, a whisper carried across the sea until it could whisper no more.